it's important to have a wholesaler who has a lot of experience in the realm because the coverage form can be gray at times. And what needs to be explained to insureds is that not every single recall is covered. Now, typically the trigger on the policy is a given recall that poses the threat of bodily injury or property damage. But there are cases where we can expand that coverage trigger, and you look at a true product recall policy, a non-food manufacturer, where we take a BOR, we get a look at the policy, and they don't have the manufacturer's E&O endorsement on there, which is incredibly important for them to have, because that's an example where we can expand coverage to include any recall that stems from purely a manufacturing error. There doesn't have to be the threat of bodily injury or property damage. It is purely any error in that manufacturing process. And so it's an endorsement that really expands the coverage, and it is just going to put them in that much of a better position if they are to have a recall.
In lieu of that too, the broad overview in terms of what insureds think they're getting covered on these sometimes sub-limited coverages on the GL policy. Carriers in the recall space now have been very advantageous in making their product more robust. So we have now coverages for if and when a product gets on the news for you and it's in a huge class action or even a big recall, that company is already seeing profit loss, and that exact loss of profit is not covered in those sublimits and those general liability policies. And usually once it hit the news, you can't really take that back. So those are where those new products in the recall market, adverse publicity, a lot of those, what we would usually consider sublimits in those policies, are now full aggregated limits in the products. And it's just those simple kind of coverage enhancements that take a seasoned wholesaler to really kind of go into policy wording and elaborate that to the insured, because they think that they're covered on that sublimit on the GL, and they're not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to the marketplace being incredibly competitive right now, and carriers doing everything that they can to differentiate themselves, to make their product better. And you see different carriers providing new endorsements, fairly regularly. And I think one of the main examples right now is an extraneous matter endorsement on food accounts. And so going back to the coverage trigger that we mentioned before, this is an endorsement that would expand coverage and give a sublimit on the policy for a loss that isn't threatening to bodily injury or property damage. If you find a fairly mundane mold in a large subset of the product, if there's some sort of insect infestation that found its way into the product, that would then be a covered claim. Oftentimes, they're not usually to the full policy limit, but they are now willing to provide some sort of coverage there for those type of events. So, and that's just one example. You see many different carriers just trying to create different policy forms that are going to be useful for the insured, that are just going to incentivize them to buy the coverage more and more.